Hey guys, in this video we're going to be creating this responsive image grid which will be made in Sass, and we won't even be using CSS Flexbox or CSS grids, so therefore it will have 100% compatibility rate across browsers. And the way that we'll be creating it is we will be using loops to automatically generate all the classes that we need, but you'll see more on that later. As for the grid itself, it allows for images with different widths, as you can see, so it's more flexible. And there's also an animation when we hover over each image where the image zooms in slightly, and this text box appears. As you can see, it follows around the cursor, which is nice. And there's no cursor in mobile, so the text just displays at the bottom and everything's in a column now. So yeah, if this interests you, creating this type of effect, then please keep watching and we will create this. So we start this project off in just an empty project folder, and in the file path we'll type in cmd to launch up terminal, and then we will type in code space full stop to launch up VS Code in that project folder. Obviously you can use whatever source code editor that you want, you don't have to use VS Code. And then we will create the markup file that we need, and then we use emit abbreviation, which comes with VS Code, to create the HTML boilerplate code that we need. And we'll zoom in a bit so that you can actually see what's going on. And we'll give it a title, we'll say clean image gallery, and then after that we'll just give it h1, just so that there's something else, well, there's something really to just to show, so we'd have a blank screen essentially. And what we'll now do is we'll create the config file, and it will be a Sass partial, so that it won't actually be compiled itself. It will be compiled in another Sass file, and all of the contents in this Sass file will be included in the other Sass file. The way that we create, the reason why we create this is because we're going to be creating the grid system in this. So all you need to do is just, for other projects that want to use this grid system, you could just import this partial into the style sheet that's unique to the project that you happen to be working with. The first thing that we'll do is we will go to Google Fonts, and then we'll get this Poppins font since it's quite popular and I like it as well. And since we're using Sass, we can just import it via this one, and we'll paste it in like that. What we'll then do is we will target every single element, and we'll say box sizing border box, and then we'll move the default margin padding that might be added to elements by our browser, and then we'll say font family. We'll use Poppins, or as a failsafe font we'll use sans serif instead. And actually, now that I think about it, this probably shouldn't be in this config file. It should probably be in our main Sass file. So we'll create it now. We'll just call it style.css. We'll paste it in there, but before this we will type in import config like so. And now if we say we restart extension host, because for some reason my extension crashed, which is a good time to mention the fact that the way that I'm actually compiling these Sass files is with a extension that I've installed called Live Sass Compiler, and that just compiles the Sass files straight from VS Code with this option that appears at the bottom. And so we click that and it should compile the CSS file stump somewhere. I'm not entirely sure why. Oh yeah, you scroll up. As you can see, it's included that import which comes from the partial as well. So now we can link to this CSS style sheet, so we'll say css style.css, and so now if we open up our markup file with live server, another VS Code extension, the header should be using Poppin style instead of what it uses by default, so that's how we know that this is working. What we'll then do, we'll begin to create the grid system inside this partial, and the first class that we'll create is this container class, and this will just center the content in the middle of the page, and it uses margin of auto on the horizontal axis to get that centering. And we'll give it some padding on the horizontal, so that because its width is 100%, but the content inside the container won't actually be touching the very edges of the viewport thanks to that padding. and we'll set the max width. We don't want it to ever exceed 140 pixels. And what we'll then do is we will now use a loop to automatically generate 12 column classes. So we start at 1 and then go to 12, therefore 12 iterations in this loop. And the first thing that we'll do is we will say we'll create a padding variable, and this padding variable will say if the iterator is 12, so if we are ready to generate the 12 column, then the value of this variable should be 12 pixels, 0 pixels. Else, so if it's 11 or anything below that, then it will just be 12 pixels all around. And the reason for this is because if our column is set to col12, then basically there's going to be 12 slots in our row. So if we wanted 2 columns of equal proportion in our row, and we wanted that to just be, you know, the entire row, then we would use 2 col6 classes. Therefore, if we included 1 col12 column, then because there's 12 slots, that will fill out all the slots in the row, and all you'll have in that row is just 1 column that spans the entire width of the row. And if this is the case, then we don't want any margin on the horizontal, on any horizontal axis, because you want the column to be touching the left and right edges of the row. We don't want any gap between that. And now with this variable and the iterator, we will create the 12 col classes. So we use the iterator. So on the first iteration, it will be col1, col-1, and then the second time it will be col-2, etc. And then after that, we'll say there is. So basically, 100 divided by 12 is 8.3 recurring. Now we can't get recurring, but we'll get close to it. We'll just use 4 threes. And so what this will do, it will start at 8.3%, because obviously, you know, the first col, this will be 1, and 1 times that is just the number. But then by the time we get to 12, this will essentially be 100. So that's how we get 12 rows, 12 slots in a row. And then padding, it will just be that padding variable. And then below this, we will use an attribute selector, and we'll use that star equals to target every element with col-hyphen contained in its class name. So because the only thing that varies between these cols is this number here, they all contain the colon and hyphen. This will simply target all of them. And inside, whoops, I don't know why I said that, sorry. Inside we'll say float left, and what this will do, it will stack and what this will do, it will stack the images horizontally to each other, so they won't be displayed vertically like they are by default. They'll be displayed horizontally from left to right. And then what we'll do, we'll create 2 classes, and for the same reasons that we removed the horizontal padding on the 12th column, we want to remove the left edge padding on the column that begins the row, and it's, you know, the leftmost column, because we want its leftmost edge to be touching the leftmost edge of the row. And we'll do that for the end, except that for the end it will be the right edge instead that we'll remove the padding from. And then what we'll then do is we'll use what's called the clear flicks hack. Again, this is kind of out of date now. Well, it's not out of date, but it's just kind of quaint, because, you know, people don't really use this stuff anymore, these flexbox, etc. But if you want 100% compatibility, this is what you have to do. But anyway, the purpose of this is because we're using floats, and what floats do is they'll take the columns out of the DOM, which means that if we have a row and then another row below that, the row below the above row won't even acknowledge the presence of the above row, because all its columns have just been taken out of the DOM, and so therefore it will try to position itself on top of the above row, and this isn't what we want. We want the rows to be displayed going from top to bottom, not all piled on top of each other. So what we do is we use this pseudo element on the row, which won't have, the actual row class won't have any styling of its own. It only exists that we could use the pseudo element on it. And because it's a pseudo element, we need to specify the content. In our case, there is no content. And then we'll say clear both, so clear the float essentially for anything below the row. And then what we'll say, we'll just say display table. So now anything below this row, so another row will acknowledge this row's presence essentially. Finally, we need to configure some the mobile view. Now on the mobile view, we want the columns to be the entire width of the row because there's very little width on mobile. So therefore, if we didn't do this, then the columns would just be really squished. So we'll comment, so we know what we're doing. And then we'll use that star selector again to target all of the columns. And this time, all of the widths will be 100%, regardless of whether it's col 12 or col 4 or something like that. And then after, we'll set the padding to be 12 pixels. So we completely remove the padding from the horizontal for reasons already stated. And we'll do the same to the start and end, so they won't have any effect anymore. We'll just copy the padding from over there. And we're now actually done with this config file, we don't need it anymore. What we'll now do is we'll create a navbar so that we have something else to display other than the main image gallery. So we'll create the nav like that, and then inside we'll use the container class, which remember comes from the partial, not the actual main style.css file. Inside create paragraph with an ID name. That's what it will say, and then we'll be working in the main CSS file now because this content isn't relevant to the grid system or anything like that. Inside we will create a variable and it will just hold a hex value, so the hex value in question will be 067 3E8. Should probably create it above this actually, even above the import. So now we can use it, but before we use it actually we will just style the body. We'll say font size, we'll just increase it a bit, 1.25 relative to the root. And because we're using, well we will be using a card, because we'll be using a card which follows, which bases its position off of the cursor and not the actual DOM. We want the overflow hex to be hidden because there is a possibility that this card element will overlap with the horizontal width of the viewport, which will cause a horizontal scroll bar to appear at the bottom of the browser. And we set overflow hex to be hidden to prevent this from happening. And then what we'll then do is we will give the nav bar some height, and we do that via padding on the horizontal, sorry, on the vertical axis. And then what we'll do, we'll target the name ID, and its color will just be that highlight variable, whoops, like so. So now if we go, yeah, as you can see, we've got that, you know, it's nothing extraordinary, but it will do for now. Okay, and what we'll now do is we'll now move on to doing the actual image gallery, which is the entire purpose of this tutorial. Well, and also the grid system as well. And the entire thing will be inside this container class. And the first row will consist of 3 columns, both of equal proportion. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, so we'll give it the col4 class. And since this is the first column, we'll also give it the start class as well. And we'll then, actually wait, no you won't, not yet. But inside of this column, we want a figure element, and this figure element will have a class of img container, short for image obviously. And then inside this, well, I've already got an image prepared, obviously you can use whatever image that you want. And we'll just paste it in there, like so. I don't know if you want to see that, but you can see it. We'll just use word warp. And then what we'll do, because remember we want two more columns. So since it's the middle one, we'll move the start, and then since it's the end one, we'll add an end. And I've got two more. Well, obviously we need to change the image up. I've already got some images prepared. And so now, they should be in the general layout, but they need to be, well, we need some padding to them, etc. We need some, styling, so we'll go to our main style sheet. And remember, we called it img container, the figure element directly inside of the column, which in itself is directly inside of the row. And the width will be 100% of the column that it's contained inside of. Height to be a fixed height, 500 pixels. You can set the height to be whatever you want it to be. And then what we'll do, we'll target the image inside the image container, and it will match the width and height of its parents, the image container. And want it to be cursor pointer. And then we'll set its object fit to be cover, so that it scales up in proportion to fill out. To completely fill out its container, even if that means cropping off some pixels. And then we'll set transform scale to be 1, so it's its default size. But when we hover over this, we want it to animate, increasing its size. So the way that we do that is we give a transition of 0.3 seconds. And we'll give it ease in and ease out so that it looks nice. And then, as I said, we want that animation to be triggered on hover. So what we do here is we say transform scale 1.05, and with the transition it will now animate to this scale. So I'll show you. As you could see, there's an animation there. It's very quick, but it is there. But the problem is that this container is scaling upwards, and the reason for that is because it's automatically resizing itself to fit in the scaled image. So the way that we prevent that, we'll set overflow hidden. So now it's only the images that scale up, not the actual container, which is still holding them. What we'll now do is we'll create the information that gets displayed along with these images, and they'll come from two sources. The first source will be this fig caption element, which is the reason why we use the figure parent element, so that we could use this fig caption. And it will have a class of image content, and inside we'll have a h3 and a h4. So h4 will be slightly smaller, obviously. And this fig caption will only be shown when we're on mobile view, because we just want it to be displayed statically, so it won't position itself based on the cursor, because obviously on mobile there is no cursor. And then as for the card that will be moved around based on the cursor's position, that will come from the span element, and that will be img content, but then hover at the end of that, and its content will actually be exactly the same. And we won't actually be able to see this at the moment, because remember we set height to be overflow to be hidden, so therefore it's only showing the image. Everything else, so like the text content that might be rendered below it, so that won't be shown because overflow hidden. So the first thing that we'll style, well, the fig caption, we don't even want to see that unless we're on mobile view. So we'll just say display none, and we'll also, whilst we're at it, we'll set the h4 to be grey. As for the card, we do want that to be shown, but only when we're hovering over the image. So we'll set image content hover. Its Z index will be 1, so it gets displayed above everything else. And remember, Z index can't work unless an element is positioned, so we'll set it to be position absolute, so it's not positioned relative to the DOM. And as for now, we will set its position to be based off of the viewport's top left corner, but ultimately we want it to be based off of the cursor, obviously, but we'll get to do that when we get to the JavaScript file. Display will be none, because we don't want to see it unless we're hovering over the relevant container. Padding, we'll give it 16 pixels, so that there's some gap between the text content and the edge. Background color, that will be white, so a white card, and then we'll set the h4. Color to be grey, just like its parent. And what we'll now do is, because it's display none here, we want to set it to be display block when we're hovering over the matching image container. So the way that we do that is target the img content hover, but only the img content hover that's inside of an image container. So display block. So now the img content hover element that's inside of the image container which we're hovering over, that will now be display block. So now we've only got one of them, so this will be display block now. To give you a quick demonstration of how this works, I'll just copy this because you already know the structure of it now. Again, I already prepared this beforehand, but these are just, you know, the different content. So now, you know, if you go back, obviously, you know, they're not positioned in relation to cursor, but as you can see how that works now. As for positioning these elements based off of the cursor, I just said that we'll be doing that in the JavaScript file. So at the end of the body, so it's the last thing to load, we'll say script, and then script.js, and we'll create it like so. And this constant will hold an array consisting of all of the image content hover elements or span elements. So the way that we do that is we just query selector all, so that stores all of them rather than just stores the first one that it meets. And then what we'll do actually, we'll create a function, we'll show img content, and this will take an event argument. It will take an event argument because it will be added on as an event listener to the document. The event in question will be mouse move, so every time the mouse moves we want to call this function. And the first thing that we'll do inside this function is we will create a loop, and the loop, it will last for as long as the img content array, and I'll just go up like so. And then what we want to do is we want to store the x and y coordinates of the cursor, and we'll get that information from the event argument which is passed into the function via the event listener. So e.page y for that. And then what we'll do is we will set every single image content hover contained inside this array to be based off of the cursor's position. And even though we're doing this for every single image content, it doesn't really matter because we'll only be seeing one at a time. So it's the reason why we can do this without, you know, messing up our application. Because although all the others will be positioned as well, we won't even be able to see them, so it doesn't matter. And then, you know, pos.x for the x position. So yeah, we set its translate, so that's how we're going to move it. And then so pos.x, very important that we don't forget the pixels there. And then pos.y, because those are the Cartesian coordinates, x comes before y. So yeah, and then this should be, if all's going well, this should, yeah, so as you can see it's working, but the problem that we have here is that our cursor is sometimes hovering over the card, sometimes hovering over the image, and that's causing problems with the animation. So what we'll do is we will go to the image content hover, and we will give it some margin top to push the card down from the cursor, and we'll give it some margin left as well, and it will be minus 20 pixels. This will actually push it towards the left rather than away from the left. So as you can see, we're getting the desired result now. This is looking good. What we now need to do is handle the image content, and we want that to display on mobile view. So actually we'll copy just the media query from here. Obviously I don't really like copying, but it doesn't really matter in this case because we're not really copying anything that you don't already understand. So the problem that we have here is that, remember the figure, was it the image container that was overflow hidden? Well, the image content is displayed below the image, which is 500 pixels, the exact height of the image container. Therefore, this combined with overflow hidden will mean that we won't actually be able to see this image content, the text contained inside the image content. So what we'll do is we will expand the image container to be height auto, so that it will just resize its height to be greater than 500 pixels just to fit inside the text content so that we can actually see it now. And then what we will do is we will say we'll use and hover. So what we'll do is basically we don't want the zooming in animation anymore for the images because it wouldn't really make sense because we can't even, there's no cursor on mobile, so we won't be hovering over anything. And then what we'll do is we'll say image content hover. So when, yeah, we don't want this to be displayed either, again for the same reason. Plus we've already got the, we want to display the image content now, which is currently displayed, set to display none. But now it won't be set to display none, it will be set to display block. So we'll add that here. So display block means that we'll be able to see it. And I'll give it some padding all the way around because we didn't give it some padding before. So we'll see what this looks like. As you can see, here it is, and then yeah, it's been added for here. There's no card anymore. It's only a card when we are at this stage. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty much done by this point. All we need to do, again, I'll just copy and paste and then explain it because it'll be way too tedious for me to do the entire thing. So what we'll do, we will, yeah, so I've already got this prepared by the way, so I'll just copy all the row. So this row is 2 images, and the images, yeah, 2 images of equal proportion to populate this row, and it's start and end because there's only 2 images inside this row. So now what we have here is, as you can see, the desired result. And yeah, it's already set up, all the styling is automatically already set up for this. Again, you can pause the video, or actually I'll put a link to this project's CodePen page in the description so you can look at the source code editor and play around with it for yourself. Finally, the final row will just be 1. The entire row will be populated just by 1 column. So therefore it will have the single column will have a col12. So make sure it's adjacent to that row, not actually inside of it. What is it? Oh, is this the gallery? So this is the problem with not working frameworks, and well, I mean working pretty zoomed in as well, so it's kind of awkward, but need to do it for the tutorial. Anyway, so that's what it is. As you can see, col12, we don't need start or end classes because you remember with the if statement we already removed the left and right padding for the col12 element, and you can see for yourself that is actually the case, as you could see here. And so yes, I mean this is it, this is the desired effect. You can do what you want with this, you can do your own images, own descriptions, you can do a clicking modal if you want to. So when you click on the image, a modal fills the entire screen, informing the user, displaying more information about the image that you just clicked on. But this is the effect that I promised you would understand by the end of this video, and I hope I delivered on that promise. So if you have any comments or queries regarding this tutorial, then I would really appreciate it if you posted it down in the comments box below. I'd also really appreciate it if you considered liking and subscribing. You would do me a huge favour if you did do that. But more importantly, have a great day and peace out.